Hi, everybody. My name is Yas Kusakawa. I'm a solution consultant here at Beyond 20. I've been with the company and in the service management space roughly 10 years. And over that time, I've helped a wide range of organizations navigate their digital transformation efforts.
Good morning. I'm Nate Wilson. I'm a solutions consultant here at Beyond 20. I have been in IT tech since I got out of high school in '98, so many, many years. I've been in the ServiceNow ecosystem for 15 years, so very familiar with the product, various roles in there from actually being on the help desk side of support at ServiceNow and into internal development, sales, and then out into the partner ecosystem. So that's a little background on me. Been around this a long time, but thanks for joining us today. Happy to see you all here and looking forward to the conversation today. Mr.
Cool.
Brian.
Thanks, Nate. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Flora. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Beyond 20. I've been at Beyond 20 since the beginning, since February of 2006. So during that time, I've worn a lot of hats. I've played a lot of different roles at the company. I've gotten a chance to kind of help folks implement ITIL and ITSM processes across a range of industries and sectors. Everything from startups and dot-coms all the way up to large federal agencies. I've done a lot of teaching on the ITIL side, several thousand students as far as that goes, and I was really privileged to be one of the authors on the ITIL for digital and IT strategy volume. We wrote that volume in 2019. It was released a couple of years ago. So I'm excited to be here with the team and talk about what we think is next for that. I do see a few. If you want to go to the next slide, yes, I do see a few familiar faces here and some people I don't know. Maybe some companies we've worked with, but names I'm not familiar with. But welcome back if you know us. Those of you who don't, I'll give you a quick background on Beyond 20. First of all, our name. Our name comes from this study that was done sometime around 2000, where Gartner basically found that 80% of the time when mission critical IT failed, it was due to what they called people and process failures. And only collectively, if they looked at the root cause of that downtime, only about 20% was caused by hardware failures, software failures, natural disasters, power outages, all that stuff together accounted for about 20%. The rest of it was, we made a change and it didn't do quite what we thought it was going to do. Or we released something new and it turns out that our test and prod environments aren't as alike as we hoped they were. Or, we had a process for that, but somebody just didn't follow it. Right. So at the end of the day, clients come to us because they've kind of realized that there's not another magic box you can buy to, kind of fix everything. And they've done, they've gotten as far as they can go. And now it's time to do the hard work of changing the way work gets done. And that's sort of the space that we've played in for a long time. So obviously, as you can see on the slide here, we are a ServiceNow Elite partner. We've been a ServiceNow Elite partner for about 5 years. We were also a top-tier partner for Cherwell Software for several years. And we still do a fair amount, obviously, with both of those platforms and ITIL training and advisory services and Agile training and so forth. So give us a call if you need any help with any of those things. But let's go ahead and move on to the topic of conversation for today. So, we're talking about this idea of the Responsive Automation Center, or the RAC, and we'll talk more about what that is. Kind of open up with, we kind of talk about this as a 3-act play, basically. The first act is we're going to talk about how we got here, right, and kind of lay the groundwork for, the path to get us to today and some of the successes and failures that kind of led us to think about a new path. And then we'll talk about, in more detail what the RAC, the Responsive Automation Center, is and lay out how you might go about defining and explaining that to in layman's terms. And then finally, we'll talk about in, today's world what the RAC actually looks like to implement. So if you wanted to go out and adopt this at your organization and move toward autonomous support, then how would you go about doing that? So let's jump right in. Let's have a little bit of a short and mercifully brief history lesson here. Nate, you want to talk us through that first box, call center?
Yeah, so we're going to talk through the history here of the service desk, and I'll even give some examples of some of my time in the trenches. So initially, the call centers, in the 60s and 70s came in, and these were more of calling a call center to order, something to come to your house, or calling a call center to get someone to come out and fix something, right? 1-800 numbers were introduced for customers to interact with companies. And not a lot of self-service, right, at this time. Maytag repairmen would come out and things like that. Then as you get into the 80s and the 90s, IBM was kind of one of the first, if not the first, to start a help desk for technology. And it was kind of doing a couple of things. The first it was doing was similar to what these other help desks and call centers were doing from the beginning of deploying, whether it was selling things or deploying people to fix stuff, but also self-help, right? You could call in, and if something in your, server wasn't working or anything like that, they would try to assist you through the help desk. And so the help desk really came out in the 80s and the 90s. I would say got really big with the invention of, but I would say the expansion of the internet. The internet's been around a long time, but it got really big, right, in the early 90s. Um, you know,
Yeah.
you know, and then we get into, go ahead, Brian, did you
Well,
want to?
so yeah, I mean, the those of you who are, have gray beards like I do, maybe are aware of what IBM called the Blue Books, back that were kind of the predecessor of ITIL, right? And so that's where the first concept of first, kind of documented concept of the help desk really came from those IBM Blue Books, which later sort of became ITIL version 1, right? And then as Nate was alluding to, you get into 2001, ITIL version 2 comes out, which is kind of the first real commercially available version of ITIL, where there are certifications and people start taking exams around it and things like that. But they really kind of expand on that idea of the help desk toward the service desk really being a single point of contact. Um, place to call for handling your IT issues, and if you have questions and service requests. Of course, at that time, we were kind of treating everything as an incident, right? A service request at that point was just a low priority incident, but kind of having that one place to do that, and that persisted into ITIL version 3, which was released in 2007. 2007 really expanded that concept to be, the everything desk, right? They wanted it to be not only the single point of contact where you'd call because, your laptop wasn't working or something like that, but also just anything else you need. If I need information, I need advice, I need to request a standard change, and, any of those kinds of things would be done, kind of funneled through that single point of contact as the service desk. And, kind of intrinsic in that is the need to escalate, right? I mean, I think, Nate, you and I talked about this the other day, but, at my, you know, at where I was working in the early 2000s, and I was working for a startup, a .com, and we were, implementing a service desk at that point. And, basically what we had was single point of contact, but it was really just a bunch of people sitting in a room waiting for either somebody to call or more often waiting for a light to turn from red to green on a screen, right? Or green to red rather. And then they would call my team. They would call the system administrators, the engineers, the architects to actually perform the work. But we weren't really having that tier one doing much of the work, right? We really had this kind of, I personally had a real adversity to the idea of having tier one folks have admin level access that would be necessary to reboot a server, to restart a server, a service on that server or something like that. So that group was sitting there and trying to coordinate responsiveness and maybe sending out after action reports and things like that, but they weren't really resolving a lot of things. And then as we got into ITIL version 3, we started thinking about metrics like first call resolution and really trying to move things over to the left, but we hadn't done a whole lot of that at that point yet.
Yeah, and kind of what we're talking about too is, from my experience and kind of what we're also talking about today when we start getting into the rack is that shift left mentality. In the mid to late 90s, you had a lot of onshore support desks getting shifted left to offshore. The reason they were doing that was, one, they were expensive resources. Two, a lot of them were expanding into tier two, tier three, tier four. So where can we put, what can we do with less? Can we do more for less, right? So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
saw that shift. And then one of the other shifts that we also saw was kind of what you're talking about, the single point of contact. But in my time in IT, probably I'd call it late 90s, especially the early 2000s and mid 2000s, was your water cooler type IT, right? You'd be walking through the halls and somebody would grab you and say, "Hey, come fix this." Or, maybe you have 3 to 5 people in IT, but one guy seems to be doing all of the work because he's everybody's favorite, right? Well, there was
Yeah.
there was no way to track this, right? This was all email. It was walking through the hallways, it was things like that. And there was a shift where so IT was typically seen as a cost center, and it still is. But I remember the days of
Yeah.
being told, you're lucky to have a job in IT because you guys cost us money and don't do anything for us, right? Well, now that everything's on the internet and on the network, it's all IT's, responsibility. So we blew up. But it was also, what do you do all day? Well, that's when you started seeing ticketing tools come out, and so that people could see what's going on, but also that stopped that single point of
Or 5,000 people calling in with the same incident, maybe you had an underlying problem and so on. So, very clear why we needed to go to that model and the benefits that we got out of it and some of the struggles that we had, all of us working through implementing that. Then when we rolled out ITIL 4, there were a couple of new things introduced in terms of, things like swarming and kind of different ways to kind of address incidents and address those things as they came out, as we became aware of them. But, fundamentally, as the kind of genesis of this idea of the responsive automation center really was about 4 years ago. The team at Beyond 20 that wrote, kind of the majority of the ITIL 4, digital and IC strategy volume. That was, me and Erica and David Crouch and, a few other people kind of got together and looked at it and said, well, organizations have changed pretty fundamentally in terms of service delivery and service development. We've moved from waterfall to agile. We've moved to cloud-based systems and automation and all the high availability capabilities that go along with that. We've gone to DevOps and CI/CD type environments, and we've been kind of deeply involved in that kind of shift as an organization over the last 20 years or so. But it really feels like when it comes to the service piece of it, the support piece of it rather, a lot of organizations have really kind of been stuck at about that 2005 level, right? We've gotten, the single point of contact and the service desk really pretty well in place and ubiquitous. And, we've shifted left some, we've opened up self-service portals. In fact, Yas, why don't we go on to the next slide? And let's talk about this from a customer experience standpoint, because I think it kind of makes a lot of sense here. But we wrote this white paper that was almost a manifesto on what a next generation service experience needed to look like. And in 2022, when we first created that, 3.5, almost 4 years ago, some of it was much more abstract, right? Because we knew that there was a need, and we knew that expectations were changing, but the technology wasn't 100% there to actually adopt all the things that we were proposing. So we built this sort of intellectual framework for it, and then now that technology environment has changed enough that frankly with the capabilities that platforms like ServiceNow have with agentic and predictive AI capabilities and so forth, we're really able to actually go out and implement today. The technology has caught up. So we revised the white paper. We had done a version of this webinar about, almost 4 years ago. And, we basically are rolling this out again with a bit more detail and a bit more, prescriptive approach. But if you think about this, at the very core of it is the customer experience, right? The customer experience, if you go to that call center level at the bottom, or even, sometimes early service desks, you're getting to somebody that basically can't solve the problem. You're going to spend 15, 30 minutes going through, getting asked a bunch of questions that maybe you've already tried and so forth, before it gets escalated to somebody else. That the second tier, the kind of fuchsia color there, was okay. Well, maybe we level up our service desk and we do a true kind of ITIL v3 version of the service desk, where we've got competent people on tier one and we've got a lot of knowledge articles shifted back. And so, I get to somebody, again, we start focusing on first call resolution, who can maybe help me there. Third tier was this idea that we're going to roll out this self-service, and maybe for simple things. I mean, a lot of us remember not that long ago, the number one ticket by volume for almost every organization was password resets, right? Like sometimes, 30 to 70% of the tickets would be, password resets. And so, for a while there, if you could go on and allow people to do self-service password reset through a portal, that was a massive win. Right? It was a massive win for the organization. It was better for customer experience, saved a lot of money, and so forth. Well, everybody pretty well got that done. And that got us to kind of that yellow level, but we didn't move very much further past password reset in terms of, allowing people to resolve things there. Sometimes we did some KCS and knowledge centered support type aspects to allow, people to, if they just didn't know how to do something, to find knowledge articles and so on. But we really didn't get to this top of the pyramid. And this is where I think that, the experience that we all have as customers in our day-to-day lives outside of the workplace really shapes customer expectations both in and outside the workplace. And what I mean is that, if you're watching Amazon Prime or Netflix or something like that, and it fails in the middle of your show, if you have to actually pick up the phone and go and actually talk to a human being. We used to talk about with service desks, the first line support and the need for empathy and the need for competency, and the main objectives there of incident management were to restore service to the user as quickly as possible, and that would be how you'd drive CSAT. That'd be how you'd drive customer satisfaction. But today, we basically are positing that the fact that someone has to talk to a human means that your CSAT is gone. Right? If you have to call Netflix and talk to someone, I know it's kind of an unfathomable circumstance because they don't do that. But if you have to call and talk to a human being in order to get your incident resolved, there's nothing that person can do that's going to get your customer satisfaction back to where you want it to be. The fact that they had to talk to somebody in the first place is the death knell for that, right? So ideally what people want is, at the very top, they want it not to fail. They expect higher availability than they ever have, and that's more possible than it's ever been, right? So they want it not to fail in the first place. But if it does, they either want it to be self-detecting, self-healing, where it's just going to come back on its own in 30 seconds. You just wait and click refresh and it's back. Or at worst, they want to be able to, solve it themselves through a self-service. Maybe they log into their Netflix account, click something to reset or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, that happened.
Nate,
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. That happened to me this weekend. I was watching Sunday Ticket. I'm a big NFL guy, and all of a sudden, all three of my TVs told me that I'd done something wrong, right? Well, basically what it was is that my IP address on my router decided it wanted to be in LA and not San Diego, so that blows out my local market, my home market. Well, all I had to do was click a button that said reset my location, and then all of my TVs started working again, right? That was resolution through self-service. Well, what I would have rather it had was it self-healed by going, well, what is the current IP address and location of this device? Oh, it's in San Diego, and then it fixed itself. But that was great customer service for me because I didn't have to call Yahoo who owns, a Sunday Ticket now, and talk to somebody. It was self-service and almost self-healing at that point. It was really a pleasant experience. Now, shouldn't have been orange and didn't fail in the first place. That would have been even better. But yeah, I experienced the exact same, thing this weekend.
Maybe your IP address was just following your football team.
I'm a
San
Broncos
Diego,
fan,
San Diego to
sir.
Los Angeles. Okay, too soon. I apologize. But no, I mean, so there's clearly a need because customers' expectations have been, changing, right? And so we've got to figure out a way to do better. Now, look, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we know that from a customer satisfaction standpoint, I mean, we want to drive customer experience, and that's a lot of the reason that we want to do this. But of course, if we can't also save some money on this, we know that very few organizations are actually going to adopt this. So, we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. But Yas, why don't you take us to the next slide? Okay.
Yep.
So let's talk about what the rack is. Yeah, go ahead, Yas.
Oh, nope, good.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So again, we have this really massive white paper on this, 35 pages or something like this, and excuse me, a couple of white papers actually. But we lay out 4 dimensions of the rack and really build sort of the intellectual framework behind this. Again, as folks that have been really working in this space and writing and creating information on service and support, over the last 20 years, we really felt like we were, properly and uniquely qualified to address this and to create this. So we did this back, 4 or 5 years ago, and the core principle. I'm not going to go through all of these because, the white paper can give this information to you as far as the history of it and kind of the intellectual backbone behind it. This is meant to be more prescriptive and the kind of how do we do it, but the first core principle there is what we were talking about a minute ago, that, availability is king, that fundamentally clients today, your customers, no amount of downtime is acceptable, right? So by the time something goes down, we've already had our first failure to deliver customer satisfaction, customer experience. And so we're going to be on the back foot from there. We're going to try to deal with that. The other one that's highlighted is really a core principle that in a responsive automation center, no incident should be handled by a human twice, right? We know there are going to be new things that come in and that we've never seen before, and we'll need a human to look at those things and evaluate those things. But as a core tenet of the rack, we want to leverage AI, we want to leverage robotic process automation, machine learning, all the capabilities that we have in our modern platform, in order to make sure that, going forward, we've identified that incident and, we don't need to have a human involved in that. That should be a zero-touch experience going forward, or ideally, maybe we just can identify a single point of failure and prevent that from happening again and make that, self-healing and get back to, C point one, right? And lastly, you saw it on the About Beyond 20 slide. Those of you who have worked with us know that we talk an awful lot about changing work life. That changing work life is our core mission at Beyond 20. It is what gets us out of bed in the morning. And we believe that this falls right squarely in the middle of that. That fundamentally, we all, we've been talking about the customer experience of dealing with a service desk and dealing with, all the different iterations of that. But we also all kind of know that, working on a service desk and dealing with an endless stream of dissatisfied customers and just, logging things and passing it on can be a really thankless job. It can be a difficult job for folks to do. And if we can take some of that low-level, repetitive work and automate that and allow human beings to do more, higher value work, right? And to interface with people and to do things that require a human brain to do, that makes work life better for everybody, both on both sides of that interaction, right? That changes the employee experience and not just the customer experience. So let's jump in and talk about what the rack is at its core, right? So it's a new model for support. We're replacing all these tiered support and all the handoffs with automation and artificial intelligence in a lot of cases. So that's going to be the power behind it. Again, when we created this 4 years ago, the intellectual framework was there, but the technology hadn't quite gotten there. We do have that now. So, we're basically talking about taking your human service desk folks and gradually transitioning to what we call rack engineers. So obviously you're going to have a fewer number of rack engineers that are required, but what the rack engineer does is it's a role, and they're going to take these new things in when they come in, and we haven't seen this incident before, evaluate, and we'll look at a flow chart for this in a few minutes, but fundamentally, they're going to be managing the platform, looking at those demands that come in, those incidents, those requests, and things like that, and building the automations, training the AI, observing and improving, kind of implementing that Deming cycle on those for continual improvement of that, but ultimately trying to achieve that metric. Again, the metrics I think are really important. In early service desks, it was, call centers, it was the average time to answer a call. And then you started moving, to things like first call resolution and mean time to restore service and things like that. Now, I think, maybe the most important metric is the number of incidents that are resolved without customers ever knowing. Beyond that, you get into, the number of incidents that have never, number of repeat incidents that are handled by humans, right? That should be a KPI that's trending downward. We don't want to have humans handling the same incident twice. So most of those incidents are going to be either self-resolving or handled through self-service. And we have the rack engineers that are going to kind of open and own that. And that allows people to focus on innovation, to focus on, higher value tasks, which again improves the customer experience and the employee experience. But fundamentally, we debated for a little while whether the subtitle of this webinar should be "How to Fire Your MSP in 6 months" or something like that, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about getting rid of human action for tier 1 support, zero touch support. And that's at the core of the responsive automation center. It basically responds to things that are coming in because it is responsive. We are reactive when we talk about incidents to a certain extent, and then we're building automations to make sure those things don't require human intervention twice. So,
and with that,
go ahead.
Before we get into our example, there are some things that I want to highlight. One of the things, it's noted here, it's a new model, right? We talked about kind of the history, but our thought here isn't that this is the just next iteration of the service desk. This is one where we have to think differently. So and one of the things I'd like to get into a little bit is the technology that enables that, right? So Nate went into it a little bit, that we started to see, with the internet, we started to see applications for tracking tickets. Great, we're tracking the tickets. Then we start to see the ticketing, and then eventually the ITSM solutions that allow us to log those things, get those metrics. We start to have self-service portals, and obviously the intention of the self-service portal was to save money, right? Like, hey, if customers can help themselves with knowledge articles, that's great. But another intent that's really important is to force customers to give us certain information and give it to us in a structured manner that we can then act on, right? Because we all get the email that says, like, I need help. Great. Great, you need help. That gives me no information whatsoever. So the self-service portal was partially a means of getting that structured information enough that then a human can look at it and make decisions and take actions, right? But now the technology is available to take unstructured information, right? If somebody sends an email with enough information, we can use AI agents to parse that, triage it, categorize it. So that's one really, really important piece where we can just take that unstructured and put it into structured. But then the other thing that we're able to do from a technology standpoint is to make decisions, right? It's not just that, hey, this incident has been categorized, right? Even after it's been categorized, an experienced technician might go through 8 different steps to try to resolve it. And instead of, mapping out the entire logic tree for that automation, it just makes sense to have a person do it, right? because all of the if-thens become incredibly intricate. But with agentic AIs, because they're goal-oriented, provided that you provide them with the right tools, they can now go through that same thought process. So it's the interpreting of the unstructured information and then making the decisions. Those are the things that historically we assumed humans were needed for, right? That's why the model shifted the way it did. And now the technology is there to say, hey, a lot of the time or most of the time, that's just not needed unless it's an exception. So instead of assuming that a human needs to be involved, it becomes, all right, when is the exception and a human has to get involved?
Right. And then working on identifying, even evaluating those circumstances and trying to figure out, hey, okay, I needed a human this time. Do I need a human next time? What part of that can I actually, streamline as well? So, so absolutely. So, sorry, we can go on to the next slide there. Yes. Yeah. So, we've got kind of a sample workflow. I mean, this workflow now assumes that that our intake for the process is coming in from event management, right? That we're detecting a failure. Of course, there could be another arrow coming in. There could be a human that's calling or emailing or sending a sternly worded fax. I don't know. But we could have other triggers for this. But ideally, we're looking at monitoring and event management being the intake for this sort of a flow. Who wants to walk us through the rest of this?
Yeah, I think Yas and I will touch on this, but I think we'll start with kind of why this is an important workflow in my experience is that being on IT help desks, being on call, working with cloud solutions in the past, if something like this were to happen without the intervention of AI, I would be getting woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And what we're looking at is how can we streamline that and how can we stop that from happening? Or how can we keep it from, if we're 24/7 shop and we've got support in all of these different time zones, how can we keep it from waking up our tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 resources in the middle of the night as well? That's the
Yep.
experience that I had, in my roles in various industries and various companies. But how can we keep that from happening? And this is what Yas and I are going to touching on is how does ServiceNow's AI engine, AI solutions help with that, and keep that from happening?
Yeah. So
Yes. Go ahead. Yes. Sorry.
yeah, so at a very high level, right? Like when Nate was being woken up at 2 a.m., he went and, he got up, went to resolve the issue, but he knew what the issue was and how to fix it generally, right? And if he tried one thing and that didn't work, he had other tools in his tool belt that he was going to go through to diagnose and fix the issue. But instead of Nate doing it, we can now have an AI agent doing it, right? But I'm going to, walking through this process from like how AI is empowering this entire process. It's important to have some distinction, right, in terms of where what types of AI are coming into play. In terms of event correlation, I think folks who've been in IT long enough know the noise that a lot of monitoring solutions can make. It's really, really important that we're getting that information, but at the same time, it needs to be actionable. So, a platform like ITOM is able to do the event correlation, and from that, we can move forward and say like, hey, is there a known resolution to this? And if so, trigger the automations that are going to resolve it, right? And then great, it's done. It's done. There was an alert. We figured out what it was. There's a known resolution. And it's complete. But if there isn't a known resolution, we envision that the workflow branches off in terms of a level of severity, right? If it's a catastrophic failure, we initiate the major incident management process. That doesn't go away, right? In terms of good practice and process that we've all learned to do, that doesn't go away. And same with the things related to change management, and then work towards resolve the incident. But if it's not a catastrophic failure, we can log it for research, notify again the rack engineers to look into it, work through problem management, and work through a permanent fix. And the other ways during this process that AI.
Right. Sorry, because at that point we're assuming that we've already said no, it's not a known resolution, so that's something that a human had to touch at some point. And we're going to log that, and then the rack engineer is going to work on building the automation so that next time when you're one row above, we're going to handle that through AI and ML. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's not just the thing of just to have the resolution can be empowered by AI, right? So when we're talking about major incident management, we can use it to auto summarize a lot of the incidents that have come in to provide a higher level view faster. Same thing with any actions that have been taken and notes that have been put in to say, hey, this is how we resolved the issue. Then that can go into, all right, auto, improving resolution notes, not just drafting them, but then going into, all right, well, those resolution notes, should that be a knowledge article? Great. Okay, we're going to take that knowledge article that, Gen AI helped us write. Now, can we use that to automate? Can we use that to teach the agentic AI what the next step is? It becomes this cycle that gets accelerated by having these different AI capabilities within, a solution like ServiceNow.
Cool. Yeah. So, we're still going to have probably some human involvement in problem management, but again, the correlation is being handled there. So, what are we talking about in terms of? And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but as we move down this stack here, what kind of ServiceNow products are we looking at leveraging?
Yeah, I mean, from what we're seeing here, you've got ITOM AI ops, right? You've got your ITOM integrations, your AI ops on things like event correlation, predictive intelligence to see, things that are happening or that could be causing issues to get this into, well, whether it's an incident or anything like that. Known resolution, right? Well, is the known resolution within your ServiceNow knowledge articles, and that's where the AI agent is getting this information? But then could you branch out into things like workflow data fabric with ServiceNow into other areas where there might be resolution steps in other systems? There could be playbooks in these other systems, SCCM, GAMP, whatever it might be, SAP, where do you have access to that information for the AI agents to learn off of and also take action, right? So you've got AI ops for the beginning here, known resolutions and resolution steps could be workflow data fabric and other knowledge bases, other systems of data. And then when you start getting into the patching and things like that, more AI. Then you get into ITSM Pro Plus with the things like initiating major incident. So that knows hey, I'm trending into this as probably a major incident. The AI agents should be able to see we just got 10, 20, 100 incidents all around the same thing. Let's open up a major incident. Or then you get into problem management and some of the things around the AI ops, not AI ops, but ServiceNow Pro Plus with ITSM is, things like getting the problem opened up, but having the information summarized in the right areas, helping with, the resolution notes for, what is it, Yas, when you do the post actions report? I'm forgetting the terms. Um,
PIRs?
no, when you go through a problem and you do your post problem review. I'm trying to remember what it's called.
Post-mortem or
Yeah,
after action report. Sure, yeah.
yeah, and you go
But
and fill out the root cause analysis and things like that,
mm,
right? The
mhm.
AI, agents and ServiceNow ITSM Pro Plus can help create those initially. I mean, think about I wake up in the morning from something happening and I just go review what's in the problem. Maybe we have an after action meeting, but the AI agent took care of it in the middle of the night, or all of our agents took care of it in the middle of the night. So those are the key product SKUs I see here. Yasa, do you have anything on that to add or?
Yeah, so I'll take, while this example specifically, the intake is coming from a monitoring solution, right? That's not always the case. Ideally, we have those tools available to us, but sometimes it's going to come in from somebody sending an email or somebody submitting a generic form saying, something's on fire. There are out-of-the-box AI agents within ServiceNow. This is specifically, I'm going to talk about ITSM Pro Plus, but that can then triage it. So it categorizes everything, and then as part of the workflow, it then also has an AI agent that runs like, hey, is there a major incident related to this issue that is being described? Okay, associate it to the major incident. Or if not, if there isn't a major incident, does it need to does it rise to the level of a problem? The critical things about things like that is, one, you get better categorization, right? We've all had the situation of we have a tool and people are using it, but the categorization is not consistent and therefore our reporting is off, right? The other thing is, all right, I've talked to so many organizations that like, yes, they have major incidents. How big was the impact? They're like, ah, like we don't really associate the tickets like, and right now that's hard to make it a priority because, you know, the major incident's getting created and it's getting resolved, right? But if you can have that process be automated, you can really see, oh, how many of those tickets that were coming in were associated to that major incident. All right, you close out that major incident, all those tickets get closed. The data becomes cleaner, things become faster, right? And those are the types of things that out of the box, there are AI agents available for.
Yeah, there are definitely, softer costs that you can find. I mean, Nate, you mentioning getting called out in the middle of the night. I mean, when I was at, I worked at, I won't drop a name, but a .com for much of my, early career, and as a system admin and a system architect, I think for the first 2 years I worked there, I got called almost every night. Almost every night, I got up in the middle of the night to restart bind on a DNS server, or just reboot a server, or restart the Apache web server on for web hosting, or something like that. Now we would definitely have an agent do, but it when I was leading those teams and I was hiring people, it is harder to retain great people when the job means that you don't sleep through the night ever. That's that makes it harder to attract top talent, and it makes it makes you less productive the next day, and so on. The other way to look at it is, it is surprising what you can get used to and what you can view as something that you can't change. But Erica still always gives me a hard time about it. In 2004, when we went on our first date, we were going to a hockey game, but I had my laptop with me. My laptop went with me everywhere because I might have to do something like that, and we hadn't moved anything down to a lower tier at that point.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think another kind of soft cost too is, from my experience, as we as we got into automating certain areas, whether it was with early chatbots, virtual agents, things like Espressive, ServiceNow's virtual agent, MoveWorks, I saw a lot of career advancement because the lower tier stuff that the virtual agents and the integrations could help with got off of these, these tier one people's plates. And I mean, I know a guy personally who went from frontline service desk to their senior tier three architect at a very large biomedical company, just because he learned the virtual agents, learned how to do the NLP stuff, and was able to help offload and self-serve and deflect some of these inbound cases he was working on. And that soft cost is career advancement and employee retention, right? He got happy in his job and stayed, and they got to keep a really valued employee as well. So seeing it from that
Yeah.
perspective, it was really interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, but there's no two ways about it. We are talking about shrinking the size of the human footprint on the service desk, and if you're outsourcing that or offshoring that, then yeah, what we're talking about here is canceling that contract, right? And eventually getting rid of that cost, whether it's human cost or, and individual organizations are going to, view differently how they're going to approach that on some organizations that might mean upskilling your existing staff and moving them to other roles. It might mean, just as you have normal turnover on the desk, we're just not going to backfill those roles, and we'll gradually transition from human agents to machine agents, right? But that has been one of those things that, if we're being honest about this, back in 2022, when we first started talking about it internally, we were saying, hey, I think we're talking about replacing a bunch of human jobs with machine agents, and we have to kind of tread lightly around that. And it's been interesting over the last 3 or 4 years how much we've all just kind of come to accept that that's happening, right? That's not just theoretical. That's definitely what this means. But that's part of where this cost savings comes from. And again, I think that still is probably better if you can take folks and move them into, more rewarding work than just sitting there in a room and waiting for the phone to ring with somebody angry on the other side. So
And
uh,
if
go ahead, yeah.
if I could interject there too, I think ultimately, we talked about no one's going to do this unless it's going to save them money,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And the practical reality is that, the use cases that are going to provide the most ROI for everybody, most ROI are going to be different for every org, but orgs are doing this. They're starting to do this, and ultimately, if you're not competitive, if you don't keep up, those jobs are going away anyways.
Yeah, that's
not to
fair.
sound doom and gloomy, but the practical reality is that this is a technology that's available. And
Hmm.
I think being in IT, all the technologists on this call have been around to see when new technologies come out, and people go like, nah, like we're never going to go to the cloud. That cloud, that's just a hype. We're not going to do that. Oh, RPA, no, we don't need any of that automation. Oh, virtualization, nah, like we don't want that. We've all seen how that conversation goes. So, again, finding the right use case is critical, but this technology is here to be leveraged, and to provide value to the organization.
Well, and I
Yeah.
and I don't think it's more or less the doom and gloom that we're talking about. I mean, this has happened so many times. I mean, when email came out, it was going to be the death of the USPS, right? When
Mm.
I was on service desks and even at ServiceNow, when things like inbound email processing got a little better, and assignment rules in ServiceNow were able to because I was the triage ticket person at ServiceNow for all inbound customer service tickets. And it was, the death of my job if inbound actions, got good. And we made a lot of inbound actions to and assignment rules to get the tickets to the right place. But all that did for me was make me realize, hey, I need to do the next best thing. I need to learn more stuff about ServiceNow, and that's how I branched my career. So anytime new technology like this comes out, there is going to be that loss of certain things, but I look at it as more of an advantage for somebody in these worlds to learn about it and expand in their career. And it's never going to kill these industries. It's just going to either supplement or cause people to have to, do higher level things. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's never been that doom and gloom. So
So, I do want to go back to a topic that Nate, I think you mentioned a little while ago, which was, virtual agents.
Mhm.
As we talk about customer experience, anybody who's, had a class with me or spent more than a couple hours with me has probably heard me rant over the years about live chat, right? Live chat was supposed to change everything. It was supposed to be this amazing new channel for communication, but 99 times out of 100 for me when I was interacting with live chat, it was number one, a worse customer experience because you have to sit there on the screen instead of just being able to fire off an email and say, hey, I've got this thing, help me out with it, go work on it. You have to sit there and keep that screen open while you're waiting for someone to respond. And invariably you get distracted, you come back, the chat has ended, you start over. It's so incredibly frustrating. But also, most of the time you'd spend that 15 or 20 minutes explaining it to the agent on the other side of live chat, and it almost always resulted in uh, the need to call somebody. You know, excuse me, they were not actually empowered to resolve anything. So as we create these virtual agents, we have the ability to not only provide that sort of additional channel for people to get help, but also to empower a virtual agent to be able to go through and do things and actually fix things and actually resolve incidents so that it provides a better customer experience and faster, right? You're not necessarily waiting for the next virtual agent in the queue. There's always another one. So yeah, let's go on in the interest of time. I know we've got about a little less than 10 minutes left, so let's talk about a few tips as to what it looks like to actually adopt this type of a model.
Yeah. So I'll start it off, as with anything that's transformative, you need to start with alignment at the leadership level, right? If you're talking about, hey, we've been working with this MSP and have thought that we've needed them and have had a contract with them for 5 years, and now it's possible to think of a path forward where, hey, do we need to renew this in 12 months or 18 months or whatever your term might be? That's a big conversation that you need to start to have. A second point that I think is important is good enough data. I put there because while, garbage in, garbage out, we're all very familiar with that, but perfect is the enemy of done, right? You can identify a place to start where you have good enough data. And the other thing is you can identify places where your gaps are that where you can start to fill those gaps with the AI technologies available. Generative is a more easier use case, but if you're saying, hey, we don't have the knowledge articles or we don't have good resolution notes, right? The generative AI and LLM capabilities are there to say, all right, we you can auto draft them, which starts to have more resolution notes to your tickets, and you could also introduce a quality check too if those things that are generated or submitted by somebody are supposed to have certain components. You can have an LLM checking that, and then obviously start to build rack capability. So Brian, if you want to go a little bit into that.
Yeah. So, as you're making this transition, it's not going to be something that happens just overnight, but it can happen pretty fast. So, first of all is, getting the technology in place. So, we have, we can certainly help with those things, but you're ultimately looking at, recruiting or retraining this rack engineer role, right? Either promoting somebody from internal in the desk or going out and hiring for this. This is it might be part of site reliability engineering, but this is someone who's going to be going in and working in the ServiceNow platform every day and kind of owning and being accountable for that automation, right? For identifying those trends, for helping to point the AI in the right places and doing quality checks and so on, and looking back at that and building out those agentic AI steps or machine learning or robotic process automation. If you're using something like UiPath or whatever, building those things out to make sure that that automation is complete. We obviously want to develop an AI governance model. This is a topic that I think we're going to be talking about quite a lot in the near future. That I think about it in the way people thought about cell phones and cloud. We had clients back in the early days with cell phones that said, "Hey, we're standardizing on BlackBerry only, and that's the only cell phones we're going to allow inside our organization." Of course, that didn't last, and then the cloud strategies. Everybody kind of sets out and says, "Oh, we're going to be Azure, or AWS, or Google Cloud only." And of course, everybody's got all of them because that's how it works. And AI is going to be exactly the same way. You're going to find that you've got ServiceNow AI and Microsoft Copilot and OpenAI and 6 other AIs loose in your environment in a couple of years from now. So ServiceNow has this product, the AI Control Tower, that really helps to coordinate and set the governance rules around those things. One of the main things I think about is that your business and your legal teams have really clear ideas as to who should be able to allow to have access to what and who should be able to disseminate what or what have you. But how are you going to control that all those AIs are doing things in the same way you want humans to do, that they're not just going to pull in everything in your environment and do with it what they will, right? That you do need a governance platform for that, and that's what you need a governance model that's process based, and I think AI Control Tower is probably the leading platform for solving that from the technology standpoint. Of course, most organizations are going to need to do both, but over time we're going to be reducing tiered service desk operations in as we're rolling that out. So if you're intrigued by this and you want to begin transitioning your support organization toward a rack model, At Beyond 20, we've created an AI accelerator package for autonomous support. So, reach out to our team. We'll do a little bit of discovery, and we can get you a quote to figure out what it would look like to introduce, to get started quickly with a rack model at your organization and start building that roadmap to, fire your MSP or to go to fully autonomous support, right? Beyond that, we've got a number of resources available. Excuse me, down in the webinars, Joanna, our director of technical consulting, did an AI-powered ServiceNow webinar about 2 weeks ago, kind of giving you the current state of the empire, as it were, what's ready now, how to decide when to use agents versus other types of AI, and so forth. We have information on, deploying ServiceNow at scale, the white papers, both the from service desk to autonomous support white paper, which is kind of the core of the rack idea. That's the big, almost a book. And then we've got another one on moving to a rack model and talking more about that rack engineer role and what the structure of that looks like. But again, if you just want to learn more about this, reach out. We can talk to you about the accelerator package and what this could look like, and allow you to have some numbers in your hands so you can kind of start building the business case and looking at how you might be able to both improve, customer experience and employee experience, and start really adopting, what the capabilities of modern ServiceNow AI are. So with that, I will give you 2 minutes of your day back and say thank you to everybody for joining. We appreciate your attendance this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Reach out. We love to talk about this stuff. And if there's anything else you'd love to see a webinar on or an article on, just be sure and let us know. We're always looking for ideas to provide useful content for you guys. So thank you very much.
Have a great one.
Have a great Thursday. Bye-bye.